Hello, and thank you to everyone for joining this event this evening, Black Art Matters, a discussion with artist Willie Cole. My name is Jackie Dishner, and I am joined by my fellow intern, Sarah Comegno. We are two of the student curators of the exhibition currently showing at Haynes Gallery.
Tonight's program is sponsored by Haynes Gallery in conjunction with the current exhibition, Explorations of Self, Black Portraiture from the Cochran Collection. Throughout the evening, please feel free to send in questions using the Q&A feature, as we will be facilitating questions to Mr. Cole at the end of the event. The exhibition was curated by an art history seminar with 14 students, Jackie and myself included, as well as other exhibition interns, Lynn Hufford and Olivia Starr, all led by Professor Jay Curley. Through this class, we learned about the Cochran's collection, primarily composed of more than 400 works on paper by Black artists.
One of the works featured in our exhibition is Willie Cole's print from 2016 entitled American Domestic, shown behind me. This work is considered one of the most powerful and confrontational in the show and highlights the African-American experience in society throughout history. Before we turn it over to Mr. Cole, we would like to thank the Cochrans for allowing us to curate from their collection and use their amazing works as an educational tool. Thank you to Paul Bright and Katie Wolf at Haynes Gallery for constantly working with us to find new and innovative ways to present art in this ever-evolving virtual world. Jennifer Finkel, the Aquavella Curator of Collections, thank you for making the initial introduction to Mr. Cole and allowing this incredible event to occur this semester. Additionally, thank you to Professor Curley for putting his full trust in each of the student curators to become creatively involved and watch our visions come to life. And now we would like to thank the guest of honor, Willie Cole, for his time spent with Wake Forest University virtually today.
Mr. Cole is a contemporary artist currently practicing in New Jersey. Known both for his work in sculpture and his prints, Cole explores themes in iconography through his use of African masks and burnt iron motifs, presenting the viewer with confrontational works commenting on both the African diaspora and the legacy of slavery in the United States. He earned his BFA at the School of Visual Arts in New York and continued his education at the Art Students League. Spanning almost 4 decades, Cole's career has led him to have shows at many major institutions, and he has work included in the collections of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Museum of Modern Art, the Philadelphia Museum of Art, the Whitney Museum of Art, and the Cleveland Museum of Art, among others. Additionally, he is represented by many galleries, including Alexander and Bonin Gallery, Kavi Gupta Gallery, and Goblock Gallery. Most recently, Mr. Cole has begun a campaign raising awareness of Black art and artists in the wake of the Black Lives Matter movement. To quote Mr. Cole, "It's hard to say Black Lives Matter without recognizing the value of graphic representation. After all, a people's art is a record of people's existence. This is why Black art matters." And now, without further ado, Willie Cole.
Hello, thank you. Good to be here. This title, this topic, Black Art Matters, has led me to do something I have not done before in a presentation, and that is to write something to read. So I'll be reading that while sharing the first few images with you, and then I'll go into a brief talk about my work. I look forward to the questions because that's always my favorite part of these presentations. I'll begin. So the first thing I want you to know is that I'm not an academic and I'm not a national spokesman for any Black art movement called Black Art Matters. I am instead an artist, or more exactly, a creative, living in these times where Black artists suddenly find themselves in the spotlight. A lot of recent news and press attributes the sudden flood of attention on Black art and Black artists to the Black Lives Matter movement. And I have to confess here that Black Lives Matters movement is exactly what led me to produce a line of products under the banner Black Art Matters. But the clock leading up to this intense focus and awareness of Black artists has been ticking and ringing for a long time. Early evidence of this goes back to the theft and destruction of so-called African art and artifacts by European raiders and marauders throughout world history. I mean, if it didn't matter, why would they steal it or destroy it? Chancellor Williams, in his book titled The Destruction of Black Civilization, makes this point very clear. He talks about the power, presence, and destruction of Black empires throughout world history, going all the way back to the pyramids. And in 1926, W.E.B. Du Bois encouraged his organization, the National Association of the Advancement of Colored People, which is a civil rights organization formed in 1909 as an interracial endeavor to advance justice for African Americans. He encouraged his people to not just fight political battles in the courtroom, but also to openly support creativity in the arts. His goal, or should I say their goal, then was to change the way the public viewed the Black community, to view them through cultural acceptance. Perhaps today we are living in that same realization, if not actualization, of that same goal. And so why are major art organizations and institutions suddenly on the same bandwagon today? Why do you have this show? Why was I invited to speak to you? It's not even Black History Month, but maybe that'll come out later on in our discussion. The artist Amy Sherrill, who painted the Michelle Obama portrait, believes that Black art matters because we Black artists are making some of the best and most relevant artwork today. To that I say maybe, but in today's capitalist society, I suspect that marketing is a strong contender for a reason. I remember the New York Times article from the 90s declaring the 90s as a decade of African art. I remember the meteoric rise of Jean-Michel Basquiat. I've always said that Jesus Christ died for our sins. Jean-Michel Basquiat, Jesus Christ died for our sins. Bob Marley died for our hair. And Jean-Michel Basquiat died for our careers. So think about that for a minute. I say that because Basquiat's death, upon Basquiat's death, every gallery in New York's Soho district acquired one Black artist. I'm actually still that one Black artist in my New York gallery today, all these years later. But today, of course, there are many more deaths that have led to this attention and to this awareness. Perhaps we really are moving towards a colorless society, one where people, to quote Dr. King, are judged by the content of the character rather than by the color of their skin. And if we are, then soon we won't need a term like Black art. Again, Chancellor Williams, the author of The Destruction of Black Civilization, says that the creation of Black institutions is the mark of a real victory in this battle. So what does the term Black art really mean? And why does it matter? Black art at its core is a Machiavellian term, a divide and conquer race label used originally to separate Black artists from real or white artists and designated us as less than or not quite equal to. Like other assigned descriptive terms used to describe Black people and their cultural and artistic output, the term Black art was accepted over time and redefined by Black artists themselves as a badge of honor and racial pride. It's a step up from being called Negro art or naive art or primitive art. So now the term Black art identifies the artist, not the aesthetic. So we embrace it, as does the world. And we acknowledge and appreciate your support, of course. But we Black artists are not all the same. We are not one school or under one manifesto. We are abstractionists and realists. We are pop and we're classical. We're expressionists and minimalists, and everything over, under, around, and in between. And our only unifying feature is our skin color. And our skin color, ironically, is the one fact that has kept us on the margins of contemporary art world for decades, maybe until now. Even our aesthetic crossed over long before we ourselves were allowed in the room. But now, to quote Drake, I have to say we started from the bottom and now we're here. And we do matter. Why do we matter? We matter because all art matters. And through much struggle and perseverance, presumably now we really are here and equal. So why do I say Black art matters? Well, it's like it was said, quoted from me earlier, it's hard to say Black lives matter without recognizing the value of Black art. Let's see. And of course, the value of Black art equals Black representation. And art, of course, is a record of people's existence. So this is why art in general matters. Black art mattered long before Benny Andrews in the late 1960s organized a group of Black artists called the Black Emergency Culture Coalition to demonstrate outside the Metropolitan Museum. It mattered, Black art mattered long before Fred Wilson's historical 1990s exhibition, Mining the Museum, exposed a hidden and in some cases forgotten Black African presence in museums' fine art collections across America. It mattered long before Okwe Inwizer became the first Black curator of the Venice Biennial. It mattered long before Picasso discovered African art. And now in this media-dense world, and at this critical juncture in world history, it matters more than ever. So my Black Art Matters campaign is an affirmation of the importance and presence of Black people and the art we produce. These hoodies, these t-shirts, etc., and these museum gift shop items were designed to give the wearer a chance to teach, honor, and celebrate the contributions of Black artists to the human experience. So who am I? The balloon guy and the shoe guy. We were in an event together at the Guggenheim there, and I couldn't resist taking this shot and giving it this label. But I, of course, am the iron guy first in the art world. Since like 1988, I've been the iron guy. So when I discovered the steam iron, I made a list in words of all the things that it provoked in my awareness and created this chart, first in words, but for the purpose of PowerPoint presentations like this one, and for live presentations, I actually made it a chart with icons. So the iron itself, black handle and silver bottom, became black handle, Black people. Silver iron became currency and represented the American economy, the way that it grows. So here on the left in that center line, you see this Black housekeeper or mammy, and on the right you see this American housewife, because in the after World War II, the suburbs were created and great luxurious items were acquired by some people, like the steam iron. So I call that whole row social. Below that, I have a row that I think of as historical, and there you see that below the mammy, there's an enslaved African. Below the steam iron, there's a boat, because the iron actually looks like a boat. And below that housewife, you actually see her home. Those are all historical evolutions that came from the social statuses of that middle row. Below that, you actually see the continent of Africa, which is where the Africans were taken from to become a slave in this country. And they, of course, they came on a ship, so that's below the iron as well, because it's another ship, the slave ship. But below the housewife, you see money, because that was all about money and the country moving forward. The people who helped build the country, of course, didn't move forward for a long time, and they're still trying to move up today, as the song says. Below that middle row, you see the periodic symbol for the iron. I think it's 30 protons and 20 neutrons, maybe the other way around. But the steam iron, of course, it needs water to make steam, so I have water here. And on the right, I have heat, because the heat and the water make the steam iron. So that's the physical aspects of iron. Above that, I have the spiritual aspects, and the African god of water would be a Yemeya. The African, and this is in the Yoruba tradition, the Yoruba deity for iron is Ogun, and the Yoruba deity for fire, or more logically stated as lightning, is Shango. So all those things allowed me to make art out of irons for many years, but that was the inspiration. So as the iron guy, I made sculptures out of iron, but I also made scorches. So this is actually a recent scorch that kind of combines today with the past being, I would say 89 to 2000, where I was making things out of irons and scorches. But I made this piece based on the number of people of color killed in police custody. I began to think of myself as Willie the Scorch. And I came to that because a New York Times writer said that my scorches represented the skin tones of African Americans. At the time, I thought it was very funny, but nowadays I kind of have embraced it, as we have embraced so many things that have been put on us as a people. So this is me working on this piece outside. Half my studio is outside, so that's my creative season where I can do a lot of iron stuff. And next to that, you see an image of the piece. Under each scorch, there's a name of someone who has been killed in police custody. And it's endless. This piece has 88 names on it. So I have 3 panels. Each one has 88 names, but I still have thousands to go. So it's kind of an endless thing. Maybe I should make it into wallpaper. But also, the pandemic has led me to do other things outside. And so I did these paintings. I haven't done paintings in a long time, but in the 70s, I pretty much worked as a painter and a pastel artist. And I used horizontal strokes because I had been inspired by the pointillist, but I didn't want to use dots like Seurat, so I had to do my own thing. And it turned up being these hash marks here. These paintings are 9 feet by 5 feet each. And nowadays I see each color representing a sound wave or a wave that's in the air. Because in today's world, we live in so many waves. In fact, those waves are going to kill us one day. We got 5G, we got 4G, we got Wi-Fi, we got Bluetooth, we got hi-fi, we have AM, we have microwave, and it's too much. I don't know what we can do about it, but I suspect eventually we'll be wearing some special radiation suits. Also in the pandemic, I was able to transcend the gallery world and step into the fashion world by designing headpieces. Let me just switch up for a minute here. By designing headpieces for a Japanese fashion designer. I think this will show it, yes. So this will show you a little bit of the exhibition. So, working with high heels has opened a lot of new avenues for me. But interestingly enough, my first interest in the art world was in fashion. So when they asked me to collaborate with this designer, I jumped at it. So I'm not going to show you the whole show, but I'll show you some of my pieces in action. So I made the headgear for each of the models. This is a Raya Kupacago. She's a designer and owner of the company and the stores called Comegno. They're all over the world. She's one of the most avant-garde designers in the world today. Just as a point of reference, in the last Met Gala, she was responsible for the dress that Rihanna wore. And she's almost like anti-fashion, as you see, and that's deliberately so. I find it often in these fashion shows, though, they make things for the runway and then they make a version of that for the stores that people can actually wear. But you'll see, I think, in the next model that they also use some of my images on the garments. Like every jacket has a lining, and the lining is actually images of my art. And they made a line of shirts with my work as well. And I think it's coming up after this guy here. I haven't looked at this in a while, but this just happened in February. The show was at the end of January. The pandemic was a challenging time. Really thought about my survival as an artist, and fortunately, a lot of new opportunities came to me that were not museum, gallery, and collector based. So here is the one I want to show you. So you see his shirt has images of my art on it, and his jacket as well. You can see the details of these pieces here. So I made the headdresses here. They call them headpieces. This commission involved me making 50 headpieces for the stores around the world, and an additional 20 for that runway show. And of course, I made them. I had to try them on myself and send them to them for their approval. Because of the pandemic, I actually couldn't go to Japan myself for the show. And hadn't been for the pandemic, the show would have actually have been in Paris. But before that came about, I got a commission from a hotel in Washington, D.C. called the Xena Hotel. And it's the only hotel in the world with a feminist theme. They're also all over the world. So this is the reception desk. A friend of mine said it looks like a Jeff Koons, like a Damien Hirst piece made with high heels. About 70 high heel shoes. This is 9 feet by 3.5 feet. Like I said, it is a reception desk in San Francisco, in the US. And it's in Europe, in Italy. It's filled with, I'm the only male artist in the hotel. I mean, they couldn't deny me because I make art of the high heels. But most of the artists, all the other artists there are women artists. Like if you walk in the lobby, there is a big mural of, there's a big mural of Judge Ginsburg that's made out of various colors of lipstick. So it has a lot of things like that in it. But my main shtick with high heels has been making these masks out of high heel shoes. I kind of make them as play. I don't have any sketch. I just have a lot of images in my mind of different types of tribal art. So I play with it and see what happens. I remember the first one that I made, it took me probably a month to identify the heels as teeth. And once I had that, I just built around that. When I look at them, I'm made very aware of my love for cartoons. But cartoons were also inspired by the surrealists. If you look at the cartoons of Max Fletcher and that era of cartooning, it's very surreal. Actually thinks of me, she says, as a surrealist. Now, for my awareness, this is based on the art of the Benin Kingdom of West Africa. So if you look up a Benin bronze heads, you'll see the similarity here. This piece is currently in Chicago on display at the Kavi Gupta Gallery. This piece is at the AGO Museum in Toronto as part of their permanent collection. And they sent me these photos, but I have to tell you, they're missing a lot because this piece has faces on 4 sides. Like here, you see a little bit of a nose here. You see a little bit of a nose here. So this piece is in a collection of the AGO in Toronto. And they sent me these photos, but they're missing a lot because this piece has faces on four sides. So right here, if you can see my arrow, is the nose of one of the side faces there. Okay, so here are pieces in that same vein from my last show in New York City, where I placed the mask on posts so people could pose behind them. Really just trying to take advantage of this love of selfies that we're living through right now. So you can see people behind the mask. So other than heads and masks, I've actually made figurative pieces out of shoes, and mostly things that I call mother and child pieces. You can't really see the baby in this piece, but this is inspired by the Yoruba tradition of sculpture, and it's a woman holding a child. You can see it, a different piece, it's a little clearer. This is a bronze piece. This is 4 feet tall, and this is the baby on the back there. This is the mother here. The baby's face here. I chose this shoe for the baby's face because I have this embossed image of what I call a frown on the face there. And this is a bronze edition here. I do a lot of them in bronze. This is another mother and child piece. So you can see the baby on the back here and the mother here. You can have other views of that. So you can see their faces close up. Someone asked me earlier about how many water bottles are in the water bottle pieces. Well, these shoe pieces, in the beginning, each one had like 30 and 40 and 50 shoes in it. But my goal has been to use less shoes now. And this piece and the piece I showed you prior to this were made during the pandemic. And I was able to use less shoes. Like the idea that I could make a head or a face now out of just 2 shoes was a great growth moment for me when you consider I used to take 30 shoes to make a head. So this is just a single piece here. This is called Woman in Heels. This is the back view on the right. Side view here on the left. But I guess I'd say more related to what you have in the gallery there. From my Scorch days, I did make a lot of things with ironing boards, because you can't talk about or understand an iron without having an ironing board or a Scorch. So inspired by Zulu shields, I started making wooden ironing boards, covering them with padding and canvas, and then scorching patterns on them. Now I started doing these in 1990. Actually, my first show in New York was a lot of these kind of things. But during the pandemic, it was requested from my gallery in New York that I make some more. So I started making more of those, as you'll see. But the iron board has crossed over into my printmaking as well. There's evidence in the piece you have there in the gallery. And I did this edition here at the High Point studio in Minneapolis, Minnesota. This series is called the Beauties. The actual Scorch iron boards were called domestic shields. These are called the Beauties because they actually represent the pain and suffering of Black women, over the decades. Each one has a name, and the names are actually family members of mine, women from my childhood. I was fortunate enough to have known my great-great-grandmother. She was 112 the year I started high school. And of course, I knew my great-grandmother as well. My great-grandfather's married 5 times. So that gave me 5 names of his wives. And the one who was my blood great-grandmother was a real domestic worker. She worked for the same family my whole life. So she's in here. And you can see the information on the board talks about the pain and suffering that those people experienced. But one of my early ironboard pieces was this piece, which might be one of my most iconic or popular pieces. It's in every major museum in New York for certain. And it is called Stowage. It was based on a popular graphic of the Brooks slave ship, where you see the slave ship in the middle, and then you see the images of the slaves laid out in the ships all around. But my interpretation is slightly different because I begin to see these images around here as representing the various tribes, which means I saw each brand of steam iron as a different tribe. So that's the tribe called the Silex, the Sunbeams, the Proctors, the Black & Deckers, etc., because they all have different scorch patterns. Because nowadays, companies all share the different patterns, but back in the 50s, the steamhole pattern was iconic for each company. So the iron nowadays is mostly in printmaking. This piece was done at the Brandywine Center in Philadelphia. And I started with an exploded view of the steam iron, but I tried to find African icons or artifacts that has similar silhouettes to everything that was in that exploded steam iron view. And that's what's here on the right. You can see this plug here has become a cat o' nine tails, AKA the whip. This is the back of the iron here. Here it's become the Ibeji, which is a cowrie-shelled figure from Nigeria that represents twins. And the rest is pretty obvious. You see they're masked throughout the piece. Here I have an antelope headdress to represent this little wire attachment here. And at the very bottom, which you may not be able to see well on the screen here, but there is the image of a slave ship underneath this part of the iron, which is called the sole plate. My third identity in the past 10 years has been making art out of water bottles. So here you see, this is the fire station that I converted into what one of my friends called a plastic palace. And this is probably about 20,000 water bottles. It's actually 2 rooms that are 15 by 15 feet each, with a 3-foot hallway between them and a chandelier in each room. You can see these are some of my chandeliers here. The one on the right was my first chandelier called the Buddhist Chandelier, because I put a picture of Buddha in every bottle. And this actually came to me in a dream. That got the whole thing started, really, was that dream. And I have to give some credit to Dale Chihuly also, because I always admire his chandeliers and the things that he has made with glass. And I've attempted to do similar things with bottles. I've even made umbrellas out of water bottles. And in the public arena, I have been commissioned to do a lot of water bottle projects in schools with children. So this is one of those projects. This is at the Pingree School in Summit, New Jersey. And this guy is 30 feet tall, and he's made out of 20,000 bottles. He had the pleasure of being a special feature in New York's Earth Day celebration in 2019. And I've made about 5 of these so far. But I show those images with a hope that it will lead you all to ask me some great questions. So thank you for your attention.
Well, thank you so much for speaking about that. That was really informative, and it was amazing to see so many works from so many different mediums that you work with. So thank you for that.
We have a question already, so everyone please continue to put the questions in the Q&A function. But our first question comes from a student who actually already emailed us today, which we very much appreciate. What other materials have you been wanting to work with? You speak a lot about your found objects, but are there any new materials you have not explored yet that you still want to work with?
Well, this year, which I kind of mentioned that and illustrated that this morning to the students, I've had the opportunity, strangely enough, to make a lot of things out of musical instruments. Like just last week, actually, I received 75 acoustic guitars from Yamaha, because Yamaha has an upcycling program, and they had been putting these guitars in the landfill if they don't come out perfect, which only they can recognize as imperfect because they all look perfect to me. And then they started giving the guitars to schools for kids to paint on. But then they discovered me. So now they're giving me the guitars to make works of art that I will then sell and donate money to the charity of my choice for music education. So that's going on in the present. I received 3 Palliser guitars just last week. I'm also making a piece out of saxophones for airport in Kansas City. Also during the pandemic, I had a piano because my kids played the piano, but they've been gone for 12 years now. I actually live here alone now, so I took the piano apart and made art out of that. So that was not a desire, but just came my way. I had a desire to make something out of Volkswagen Beetles, but then I discovered an artist named Zach Cove made, and I know he's not listening, so I'll say this. He made what I saw as some horrible art out of Volkswagen Beetles. So I kind of put that concept down. But I'm open to something new. Again, I don't usually choose these objects. They kind of come to me. Like I didn't choose to make out of the irons. I found an iron on the street. I didn't choose to make out of the hair dryers, but I found a mountain of hair dryers. I didn't choose to make out of the bicycles, but I saw a bicycle and I saw that there was something in it. So I collected a bunch of bicycles. So I don't know what my next object will be, but I know that it's looking for me right now.
We really loved seeing your future saxophone piece this morning that you shared with a lot of studio classes at Wake. So thank you for that. Our next question kind of relates more specifically to your Black Art Matters campaign, and it's actually from one of the students that curated this exhibition. So she asks, how do you feel that institutions can best support Black artists moving forward?
Support in this sentence is not a clear word for me. I have this habit. I don't know if it's like my point on the autism spectrum or not, but I take these words very serious. So one thing I would like to see happen, I would like to see a Black art history exhibition, a Black History Month exhibition that doesn't contain art by Black artists. I think that will go a long way into pulling this all together. To me, that's like mental and psychological support. To be singled out is necessary sometime, but the reason I said that the term was Machiavellian, because in Machiavelli's book, I forget what the name of that book was, you all may know what it's called, but in that book, one of his strategies was divide and conquer. So when you pull people out of one group and give them their own label, they may feel good about it for a while, but there's an ulterior motive, which is divide and conquer. So just to be more integrative in the topic of what is now called Black art, I think that's a way to move forward. Support word, I guess, is more related to education. It's like the example I would give is when I was in high school. I was in high school in the 60s in one of the blackest cities in America, Newark, New Jersey. And up until I started high school in 1968. So that was the year of what I call the Black consciousness movement in the United States. And I went to high school for art, so they were teaching us all about European art. But once the riots happened and we had a major Black power advocate and cultural icon, a poet, playwright, and painter, Amiri Baraka, aka Leroy Jones, once he came to Newark and opened up his studio and theater, suddenly our curriculum changed and they were teaching us about African art. So I think expanding the aesthetic to include African art would be a valuable asset to the students. I think pointing out how African aesthetic has influenced contemporary art, like the artist James Brown is very African. Artist Pablo Picasso is very African. So just pointing things out like that, pointing out the connections and the influences. I mean, the whole idea of putting things together that are not traditional art materials is very African. You know? So I think those are some of the steps that can be taken.
Thank you for your thoughtful answer. We have another question from an audience member. So they said they love seeing the variety of your practice, but their question focuses on how do you think or how do you feel about a white artist who uses Black issues as a theme in their work as if they are a Black artist with similar grievances? So I think this goes along with the lines of your white artists and Black History Month idea. You can elaborate on
I
that.
don't have a problem with that, but some people do because of that whole divide and conquer thing. You know, it's like, you know, Black artists have painted landscapes and landscapes that don't involve people, and they still call it Black art because the artist is race. Um, Now, I know in the 60s, Black art was really specific in its subject matter, at least in the mainstream world. I remember I worked at a library when I was in high school and I actually stole a book off the shelf called Black Art in America because I thought nobody's looking at it except me. And all the artists in that book were kind of like fitting into that stereotype at that time. But nowadays, as I said in my opening opening monologue, I guess, that it's not an aesthetic. It's not even a subject matter. You know, we're Black artists, and it's Black art only based on race. And our goal is, as a society, I believe, should be to eliminate all racial identifiers and just be human beings. You know, I mean, you can even change human beings to HUE, different colors. We're human beings. You know, so anybody can do anything because everything comes from the same source. But I know that it would be challenged. I had a friend, and I say had because I haven't seen him in years, but he was a white artist from South Africa, and his images were of Black people. But that was his world. You couldn't deny him that. So I think a white artist using Black subject matter, you know, it adds to the need and the movement towards a clearer, more tolerant, and more race, what's the word, less racial society.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's definitely something that us as curators of this exhibition have been thinking about and kind of the impact of Black art in our society today. And now moving towards kind of our more present society, specifically in the past year, how the pandemic has kind of affected your artistic process. And one of the audience members asks if the pandemic has compromised your archaeological digs to find the found objects that you use in your artwork.
Well, if I was just starting out, I would say yes, but I, you know, I started making art out of water bottles maybe about 7 years ago. So I don't have to collect water bottles. When the pandemic struck, I had 3 community water bottle projects. They were all postponed because the bottles could contain the virus, you know. But it didn't stop me from making work in my studio because I have a shipping container filled with bottles from the bottom to the top. You know, so every object that I've used in the past, I have tons of that stuff here. You know, I mean, I have an indoor junkyard of selected junk. I have thousands of irons. I have hundreds of bicycles. I threw away my hair dryers a few years ago, but I have a whole lot of stuff. And when I made the piece out of saxophones, I just went online and ordered them. So it hasn't affected my ability to acquire or use the materials. But what it has done is it made me think about things I did before I was Willie Cole, the assemblage artist, and it's moved me back towards painting and drawing a lot. And actually, before the pandemic, I really don't pick up a lot of stuff on the street anymore because I need so much of it. Like my shoe stuff, I'd never found shoes on the street. I went to a thrift store in Athens, Georgia, and told them that I wanted to buy every high heel shoe they had. So in that one hit, I got like several thousand pairs of shoes. And I did the same thing here in New Jersey. So I have a studio here on the second floor that is thousands of shoes because I've been doing the shoes, I think, since about 2005. So I don't have to buy any shoes to make those pieces. But I still go to the thrift store every Wednesday because I'm open to inspiration. So I got to walk through and feel things and see things. So I still do that.
So we have a couple more questions about your practice overall in general. So obviously your sculptures and your paintings and your prints all differ in size, but is there an ideal scale range that you have? Do you have something in mind that would be like the largest you'd ever go or the smallest you'd ever go? I know you've talked to us recently today about how you're 3D printing miniatures of your sculptures, and there are a couple questions about do you do miniatures? So maybe you want to explain that and then explain, the range of the size and scale of your work.
Uh, Well, at some point in my career, I actually was thinking that they sell art by the inch. That may not be true, but sometimes I feel like it's true. Uh, but my sizes in general are based on the objects. For example, I showed this morning the piece made from the saxophones. I had to look at the saxophone, or even with the shoe is a better example. I had to look at the shoe and declare a certain part of the shoe to be a certain part of the face. So that's what determines the size. Whatever part of any object fuels inspiration, that becomes a determination of the size. You know, um, but then in the marketplace, I had an interest in making like smaller things or things in different sizes for different purposes. Like institutional size art is a great thing because you want it to be purchased by museums and be in corporate lobbies. And for me, that's bigger stuff. So I started blowing, as I showed earlier today, and I still have this in front of me, blowing some of these shoe sculptures up to different sizes, through 3D printing. So I will scan the actual sculpture and then blow it up in styrofoam to a bigger size. That's how I got the big bronze shoe sculptures. They're not made from big high heel shoes. They're made from real shoes. The sculpture is then scanned in the computer and then print out in foam to enlarge it. And I've blown those up to 7 feet tall. And as you see here, I've also made them very small. So that's the size, I guess the size answer for me, any size. Like this is a painting behind me here. I like, when it comes to two-dimensional stuff, I really like large stuff because I want to be in it. I get more feeling from the painting when it's bigger than me. Now, I'm also an illustrator, so I do smaller illustrations, but I do them 18 by 24 is the largest that I've done from my own use in the past year. And when I print them, because I do them as book illustrations, they come out page size, but I do them larger just so I can get more detail into them.
Well, thank you for that. It's really incredible to hear about the formal elements of your career. So we actually have one final question, and this is a question from an audience member who asks, what has been the most fulfilling aspect of your career thus far? Has there been a specific show, installation, artwork, or anything else in your experience that stands out to you?
There are a lot of things, but when you said that, my first thought was my son in middle school for Black History Month had to write about someone, and he chose to write about his dad. That made me feel great. And my daughter, like 10 years later, did the same thing, and that made me feel amazing. So now I have like 4 granddaughters, and perhaps they'll do the same thing. But that to me was the most, I think fulfilling might not be the right word, but that gave me the greatest feeling that I've had as an artist, that my kids saw me on the same level of importance, as a person of African descent, that we see Frederick Douglass, Martin Luther King, like they saw me as a part of contemporary history, if there could be such a term. Other than that, as an art producer, I don't know. Everything feels good, but after so many years of doing this, there are not many surprises. Like my life is pretty even. It's like if you work at McDonald's, Monday and Friday feel the same. You're doing your job. So I'm excited when I discover something new in the work, but I don't get a big rise too much. Like the present, like this piece, I have it right here in front of me, still made out of saxophones, is exciting for me because it's the newest thing. But since I finished that 2 days ago, I'll be back into my watercolor painting tonight, and that becomes the most exciting thing for me. So that's how that goes.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for answering all of the questions. And that was such a profound final thought. And you really are a contemporary figure for the Black community. And that just shows how you're in our collection here today. So thank you so much.
Yeah, and thank you again for your time today that you took with our students this afternoon in your studio visit, your presentation this evening, and answering all of our questions from audience members. I'd also like to thank again the Haynes Gallery team, everyone involved with Wake the Arts who supported having Mr. Cole here with us tonight, everyone who joined us in the audience. And lastly, please come and visit us in the gallery. Come see Mr. Cole's work. Please support his Black Art Matters initiative and continue supporting Haynes Gallery programming initiatives. Thank you all. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening. And thank you again, Mr. Cole, for everything you shared with us today. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You all did a great job too, by the way.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.